Great risings, everyone. This your girl, the goddess. We back with another video. You guys, the title of the video is called Showtime at the Apollo, right? So, this video may not even resonate with everybody, but I grew up off of watching Showtime at the Apollo. So, something inspired me to dig a little deep into like the history of Showtime at the Apollo, and bitch, I got some tea. So, okay, Showtime at the Apollo was this show that was called, it eventually um got the name of like the Black Mecca, right, in New York City, because it's the place where people would go if you had talent, if you was feeling inspired to become somebody. Showtime at the Apollo was the place to be, right? So everybody used to tune in to the show, right? So I'm like, why did they name it Showtime at the Apollo? All right. So Showtime means get go. Using it in a sentence like, oh, I was about that life from the get go, as an example, right? So Showtime is get go. Um, it also means that when the cameras get to rolling, you get into character and do your thing, right? So Apollo, this was shit start getting weird. So Apollo name comes from the Greek and Roman god of sunlight, prophecy, music, and poetry. Okay, so who is the god of music or the angel of music? The devil, right? So if we reverse it, it's devil from the get-go, like evil from the beginning. Okay, so it was owned since opening its doors in 1914 and introducing the first amateur night contest in 1934. Apollo played a major role in the emergence of jazz, swing, bop, R&B, gospel, blues, and soul. All quintessentially American music genres. Now they talking about American music genres, but what they really want to say is they pretty much want to be the reason for all of the music that Black people are a part of. They want to be like the start of it, allegedly, and they know damn well they ain't got no rhythm. But anyway, that's for another topic. So before it became Showtime at the Apollo, it was called um it was called it was first owned by George Keister and Sidney Cohen in 1914. Benjamin Hertig and Harry Seaman obtained a 30-year lease on a newly constructed theater, calling it Hertig and Seaman's New Burlesque Theater. So before it was called Showtime at the Apollo, it was New Hertig and Seaman's New Burlesque Theater. Now burlesque, cause I'm like, wait a minute, that one not a burlesque. So okay, American burlesque is a It's an exotic dance style that draws on theatrical and often comedic performance elements. First introduced by a visiting British dance troupe in the 1860s, burlesque took off in America even as its popularity dwindled in England. So they would have like all type of revealing costumes. They would be They would perform like drama shows or whatever. They would make fun of some cultures, which is in the early 1900s. Who were they making fun of? The Native Americans. Native Americans wore a lot of feathers in their clothing, and so they would dramatize and make fun of Native Americans while they were performing on stage, and just it's an abomination. But anyway, so it was kind of like a whorehouse. Yeah, yeah, like a whorehouse. Um, and then they turned it into, now mind you, when it was all these different things before it even became Showtime at the Apollo, black people wasn't even invited in though, or it was, let alone was allowed in though, or could even purchase tickets to get in. Now all of a sudden, y'all turned it into Showtime at the Apollo, and the majority of the audience are the global majority. Okay, so then they had this wood stomp, right? So let's go back to the history. So in 1933, Fiorello LaGuardia, who would later become New York City's mayor, began a campaign against the burlesque, and Hertig and Siemens business was one of many theaters that would close down. Cohen reopened the building as the 125th Street Apollo Theater in 1934 with his partner, Morris Sussman. I don't know. They talking about he served as a manager, but I don't know. They said that. That's real sus. To my partner. Why they didn't say business partner? Partner could mean your significant other, but I mean, anyway, so Cohen and Sussman changed the format of the shows from burlesque to variety reviews and redirected their marketing attention to the growing African American community in Harlem. I bet they did, cause they the ones who was gonna keep the company damn open with their business. So Frank Schiffman and Leo Brecher took over the Apollo in 1935. The families would operate the theater until the late 70s. Then the Apollo reopened briefly in 1978 under new management, then closed again November 1979. Um, so now let's go back to the guy Schiffman. So he okay, how Harlem's Apollo Theater turned into the mecca of black show business. So Frank Schiffman was not going to be like the nice guy. Basically, he was ruthless with competitors and sometimes almost ruthless with artists, particularly once he had no competitors left. But under Frank Schiffman, Harlem's Apollo Theater became the mecca of black show business. If you sang, played, danced, or told a joke between the mid 1930s and the mid 1970s, odds are inhumanely high that at some point you did it on the well-worn stage at 253 West 125th Street. Artists who won the Apollo Amateur Night Contest include Sarah Vaughan, Pearl Bailey, Ruth Brown, King Curtis, Wilson Pickett, some other folks. The list of artists who simply played the joint starts with Bessie Smith, Billie Holiday, Louis Armstrong, Bill Robinson, Duke Ellington, Cab Calloway, the Nicholas Brothers, and Sammy Davis Jr., and goes on from there. Some white guys were regulars too. Um, at the end of the day, Apollo was to entertainment what Yankee Stadium was to baseball and the Louvre was to art, play there, and you were sitting on top of the world. The price for the gig was being nice to Mr. Schiffman and accepting Mr. Schiffman's wage scale. On their first visit to the Apollo, the Ink Spot split $160 total for the week. 7 days, 6 shows a day. Wow. He would pay more for headliners, and he would also accommodate performers who had reputations to maintain. Y'all already know what that means. He might just pay them $300, but he giving them a contract that said $1,000 to show their friends. Roguish. So basically, he was underpaying people. Okay, and they still was coming to the show to keep the business open. So, now while the entertainment was going on at Showtime at the Apollo in the early 1900s, I'm like, okay, if Showtime at the Apollo is to entertain, to distract, what were they distracting us from? Well, in the early 1900s, John D. Rockefeller had a major impact on the U.S. through his aggressive expansion of Standard Oil. Would you look at that? So that's what you was doing while other people was distracted, being entertained by Showtime at the Apollo. Back that up. The exceeding enlargement of the corporation led to significant public concern about the creation of a monopoly and resulted in Standard Oil being able to control production and pricing in the oil industry. Hmm. Hmm. Okay. Now I know y'all remember the piece of wood. So that the wood stump that they would rub before they went on stage. They would not let you perform on stage if you did not go and rub that piece of wood stump, right? Now here y'all talking about all this, COVID that, germs. How many people y'all think rubbed that piece of wood? COVID wasn't even thought about back then. All right, but anyway, so the piece of wood was the tree stump that when they built Showtime at the Apollo on that street, when they had to expand the roads, they started ripping the trees up, right? So the tree stump that sat right there by the Apollo was an elk tree. And so they took the elk tree, they cut it up in a bunch of pieces, and they had some pieces for souvenirs. They had some pieces that they were selling to get rid of, and then they was carving some artists in the pieces of wood. So I'm like, now that's very spiritual and symbolic. Why would they carve people into wood? It's giving ritual. Like, why is you carving stuff into the wood and then you got people worshiping this wood by going up, touching it, putting their energy on it and rubbing it before going on stage? Then it just so happened to be an elk tree. So, according to Irish folklore, and the guy who owned the building at one point not only was a Mason, but he was Irish descent. Okay, so it says trees are a necessary attribute to the archetypal locus Amonis in all cultures. Already the Egyptian Book of the Dead mentions sycamores as part of the scenery where the soul of the deceased finds blissful repose. Egyptian Book of the Dead, Apollo. Okay. The image of the tree of life is also a favorite in many mythologies. Various forms of tree of life, trees of life, also appear in folklore, culture, and fiction, often relating to immortality and fertility. These often hold culture and religious significance to the people for whom they appear. For them, it may also strongly be connected with the motif of the world tree. Tree worship refers to the tendency of many societies throughout history to worship or otherwise mythologize trees. Trees have played an important role in many of the world's mythologies and religions and have been given deep and sacred meanings throughout the ages. Human beings observing the growth and death of trees, the elasticity of their branches, the sensitiveness, and the annual decay and revival of their foliage. See them as powerful symbols of growth, decay, and resurrection. The most ancient cross culture symbolic representation of the universe's construction is the world tree. Hmm. And then the elk tree is you have okay, elk symbolism. The elk is a proud and confident animal. It's a message for you to be more self-forgiving. Um Native Americans hunted the elk, following the herds and using all parts of the elk for food, shelter, and clothing. Its teeth are highly valued and remain a symbol of wealth, often used for jewelry. Um, Elk medicine has more to do with the healing and protection of the heart and emotions. Um, the elk teaches pride, strength, stamina, and agility. The Shawnee called the elk wapiti, which translate into white rump. The wapiti is a symbol that it's time to take the next step in life and do it with courage. To the Lakota, the elk was an important part of their spiritual beliefs. And then in the masonry chapters, you have the Elks Lodge. The ooh, Benevolent and Protective Order of Elks is an American fraternal order founded in 1868, originally as a social club in New York City. The fuck I said, which is the Loyal Order of Moose, all type of shit. What's the purpose of it? And then, um, okay, what does moose translate to? Moose translate to muse. And the definition of a muse is to think or say something in a thoughtful way. Like I could sell the house. She mused, but where would I go? Any other nonsense? All it's dealing with poetry and song over the arts and science, the Greek muse of history, which goes into wordplay, because from the beginning, it's like devil worship, and then the moose, the wood stump. It's just like all this stuff ain't no damn coincidence. Then you had the Sandman, right? So the Sandman is the clown. After they boo you, the Sandman is the clown that will come out and 2112 in the cloud and will use the broom to sweep you off the stage if you suck, if they booed you or whatever. So the broom, mind you, sweeping someone's feet, that's like bad luck. And then Sandman, why is your name Sandman, but they had you in a clown outfit? So not only were they making a mockery of black people, because the clown is a mockery of a black person due to the big hair, the big afro, and then the big fat nose that they made it red, and then the big thick lips that's painted red. It's like William Baker, better known as Flint Marko, and his supervillain alias, the Sandman, is a character and antagonist in Marvel comics, typically serving as an enemy of Spider-Man. He is a supervillain who can control and manipulate sand. Sandman was created by the late Stan Lee, and that's the Marvel character, right? But the Sandman is a mythical character in European folklore who puts people to sleep and encourages and inspires beautiful dreams by sprinkling magical sand onto their eyes. Now, in real life, sprinkling sand in the bitch eyes, you ready to fight, you mad. So it's a fictional man supposed to make children sleep by sprinkling sand in their eye. That shit don't even. How the fuck sand gonna make you go to sleep? When that shit tear up your retina. Founded like so many of Hoffman's tales on the provision of a nursery store, it uses the image of the Sandman to represent the dark side of human nature. Everything the Sandman touches is spoiled. Everyone he has influence over is ruined. His only desire is to sow suffering and hopelessness. Well, I be damn. But the Sandman is the one coming on the stage that goddamn y'all name him the Sandman though. And then when you boo somebody, not only are you tearing down their confidence, but boo is to cry aloud, to roar, to shout. So when the ghost says boo, then in a certain historical sense, it's saying I'm yelling. So to cry aloud, to weep. Oh, that wordplay, a motherfucker. So yeah, that was just a fun fact of what really be going on. All that tying in together, that was no coincidence. But I love y'all. to the next video.